Okay, I think I'm live on most of the platforms. Of course, I'm getting a signal saying that it's a low signal, but I don't think it's low. Yeah, whatever. We're gonna record it anyway. Okay. All right. Yeah, this is Brother Johnny of the. Let me get this cut on too. Maybe it's low. I don't know. This is Brother Johnny of the 19 Report, Manning, South Carolina. Sincerely thanking everyone for tuning in. Again, if the signal does not hold, then we will just continue on until, I guess, whatever. It's always something with Facebook and everything else. But we're on Periscope, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and then we're also on YouTube, and we're recording this live. So I'm hoping one of the platforms will do us a solid and allow us to get this broadcast through, because I was supposed to do this on several days ago. It gets tedious trying to keep going and watching these boards and looking to see who's looking. I'm not too concerned about who's looking, and like that, but it's important. So I want to go directly into the subject today. We're talking about the babysitter's kids may be molesting your children. We're talking about who we leave our children with as we try to make a living on our jobs. We're talking about molestation. We're talking about rape. And we're talking about the babysitters that we call babysitters that aren't qualified to watch our children because they're busy doing something else. So I want to go, first of all, anyone that knows me, I get up on my soapbox first and I do my little intro, and then we go into the subject matter. So we live in a world now where, this is my teleprompter in front of me, so that's what I'm looking at, because I don't like to ramble on. Everything we say sounds good, and somebody may agree with it, but I don't like to ramble. I like to say specifically what I feel as if though God told me to say, and then go from there. So we live in a world where perversion is glorified. That's a given. Everybody, including myself, has been enticed in one way or another by some form of pornography, some form of filth. The idea of delving into the most freaky side of ourselves is where we are mentally, and it's where we love to engage. And as a result of our minds and our hearts and our bodies, and now even some of our spirits agreeing with this negative side of our sexuality, we are conceiving ideas, we're conceiving thoughts, and we're conceiving children through acts of sinful sexual practices. Now I want to go into, we only have two biblical references today. Then we're going to go in, and then we're going to close with some examples. We're talking today about the babysitter's relatives may be molesting your children, how we drop our children off to people that we trust or people that we don't have time to try and delve into their life to trust. There are at least 10 questions we should ask any sitter before we allow them to babysit our children. But we don't ask because most of the time we just don't want to know. Now let's go into Psalms 51:5. I was just talking about how our sinful sexual practices are producing children of sin. Psalms 51:5, the King James Version of the Bible says, "Behold, I was shaped in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me." These are little key points and tips. Sometimes when you're reading scripture, most of the time we like to stay on one subject, on one idea that God of, and that only causes the cycle of more demoralization to continue. We're talking about the babysitter's children and the babysitters not being qualified to take care of your children and how they're being molested. We're going to go into a few examples, but again, I'm still on my soapbox for a few more seconds. Now, as a result of our not experiencing key parts of growing up, children become resistant as we did. They become rebellious as we did, and uncaring in what they do and how their actions may affect others. Now, We have a generation of children who will tell you in a minute, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. All I care about is me. And they mean that. And those who don't say it, think it. And their actions reflect it. So we're in a time period where we're trying to give advice to adults how to live better, how to have a better marriage, how to have a better life. But if your childhood has been damaged to the point where you don't have any faith in anything that anyone says, then none of this information really helps you. So we have gurus constantly talking, but not delving to into the underlying issues of why a person is or are or has been or will become the person that they are. Now let's go into Numbers 14 and 18, and this is the last scriptural reading. We're going to move kind of fast. I got a real busy day today. Numbers 14 and 18 of the King James Version of the Bible says, the Lord is long suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquities and transgressions, and by no means clearing the guilty. By no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generations. Now to Periscope, I go under the name of Music Man on Periscope, and I know when I come on, you're expecting music. But I go under the name Music Man because of my love for old music, 60s, 50s, 70s, you know, the good stuff, in my opinion. And I usually play music on Periscope, but every now and then I will talk about something that is very important to my heart that I feel I'm being guided or led to talk about. Today we're talking about how our children at an early age are destroyed mentally, broken spiritually, and sometimes being led into homosexual and lesbian lifestyles because they were introduced to it and it felt good, and they thought that is the way that they were supposed to be. Now we've seen recently in the news about the Olympic doctor who has been accused of molesting several of his clients, including Gabby and a lot of the other winners of gold medals in the 2017 Olympics. And if you're on YouTube, I'm showing a picture now of the doctor and of some of the people who are now accusing him of molesting them. Now, these women were entrusted to a system that let them down, period. Yet they wanted to participate in the sport that they love, so they took the abuse and came to compete with a smile on their face. Now, when we saw them on television, that's my iPad falling down. And I said if it fell, I wasn't going to pick it up. But I'm going to pick it up one time. I don't want it to keep falling. I don't want it to break. So I'm probably not going to keep it up. I don't know. I don't want it to fall again. Okay. Again, they're going through this abuse, and they're going through this abuse in silence because they want to compete in the sport that they love. Now, I'm sure someone knew about the abuse, but usually the people who know are probably doing the same thing themselves or are too afraid of the consequences of telling the truth. And we went on thinking through life that this has to be normal. And doing it to someone else wouldn't be a problem in there. And that was that. Now, I want to talk today about several incidences that may be happening in your home, my home, elsewhere, and why our children may be suffering in silence. Have you noticed that their behavior has changed? Have you noticed that they're acting out and rebelling against you? Have you noticed that their mindset, they're distracted by things all of a sudden? Have you noticed that they don't like to be naked? They don't like for people to see them naked. Have you noticed that certain people, when they get around them, they start to cry or become nervous or become withdrawn? We leave our children with strangers during the day and overnight, and most of these people aren't qualified to be a caregiver. So they put all of the children, male and female, all of them in the room together, give them toys and food, And then they are either with their boyfriend, their husband, or stuck on the phone, or stuck watching the television for hours, not monitoring these children who are curious and who are seeing things through all of these electronic devices that may be piquing interest in them to try things that they normally wouldn't try. We're talking about how girls begin to licking and touching on girls, how boys begin to licking and touching on boys, and how this begin to feel good, and the person is not being raped forcibly, so it feels like the proper act at the proper time, and we begin to enjoy it. And by the time we're 10, 11, or 12, I'm gay. I'm a lesbian. And there are people in the home, boyfriends, who, after you drop your children off, all of these strangers come into the home and have access to your and my children. And once this happens, the children cannot believe in God, because what God would allow them to be molested justifiably in the name of God. Now, Bishop T.D. Jakes directed a wonderful movie, in my opinion, that expressed the sentiments that I'm saying right now, entitled Woman, Thou Art Loose. And it was specifically about molestation and how a mother who was desperate for love herself got angry with her own daughter because she didn't want to hear that the man she chose to bring into her home was molesting her only daughter. That was in Precious 2, I think. Her daughter went through many trials as a result. And as a result of that, ended up in prison, came out of prison, and eventually killed the man who molested her. He was in the church talking about he found salvation, but salvation may have fixed him, but it didn't fix her. And in the church, she gunned him down on the movie. Because that is the pain, the level of pain, the level of hurt that goes along with being molested, and no one hearing your cries. Now, I want to go into a few scenarios. These are true stories. The names may have been changed to protect people who are dear to me and who just gave me this information, but I don't think it's my right to share it, even though they don't mind. Now, I mentioned my brother and I being molested by the babysitter's daughter. When we got over there during the morning, she would take us around the back and make us pull our pants down and perform oral sex. Then her and my brother would go into the barn and I would just go off and play. I didn't feel anything from it. It wasn't forced. It was just whatever it was. I didn't know at the time. But that in itself puts in your mind that what happened, since it didn't feel like it was coerced or you weren't forced, that it couldn't be a bad thing. And we used to, back in the 70s, have a free lunch program where we went to a church. We stayed there all day, and then we came home, but we had to walk through the woods. And there was a family they were real bullies. I mean, everybody was afraid of them. Now, I don't know if it was me or if it was my brother, but it was one of the boys who forced him up against a tree and performed oral sex on him. I remember us running, jumping the ditch, going home, and this type of thing, you don't mention it ever again. But it's inside your mind. Family members being molested by each other and not knowing that it's molestation. I have a friend of mine whose aunt would come home intoxicated. He was 15. She would make him have sexual relations with her, and she taught him how to do it. It wasn't forced, so it didn't seem like an issue, but it shaped his mind until this day. I have another partner of mine who was molested, and someone very close to me who was a female who was molested by the babysitter's son. He used to insert a pencil into her vagina, and one day he did it so bad that she started to bleed. She was older, she was potty trained, but she came home with a pamper on, and the pamper was bloody. We charged the babysitter and her son, took them to court, and because he was underage, we lost the case. But that affects a person for the rest of their life. Now, I have a son who the babysitter's son used to force him to have oral sex on him. And then when the babysitter's son wanted his brother to do it, he said, no, I'll do it. I'll do it. So he took that for his brother as a child, and he would act out. I mean, scratch up the car and do all kinds of things because of his anger, because no one saw that he was going through a traumatic experience. And as parents, we should have seen that. But you're so busy trying to live, trying to make money, trying to survive, you miss a lot of things. We do as parents. My sons came home one day. They were in, I think, the 4th grade, maybe. And they told me that they saw their friend having sexual relations with his brother, anal sex. They saw it. If that child didn't see anything wrong with that, desiring to have love from his brother and at the same time feeling pleasure from what he was receiving, not only does it damage his psyche, but it makes him to think that, okay, well, if someone told him that it wasn't. Now, child pedophilia and babysitters, boyfriends, brothers, and other family members coming in after you drop off your children is a major issue. I used to drop my son off at a sitter so I could go to work. And my wife went to pick him up one day, and her brother was in there, and he's a weed smoking. He in there cooking, smoking, and children laying all over the floor. And my son had never wet himself before. But when I got there, he was wet. I didn't take him back. You don't know what these people are saying to your child, how they're threatening them, frightening them, scaring them in order to keep them in line. You don't know. That is a form of molestation. And that puts a fear in a child and makes them not able to function as a functional human being should. And it disrupts their growth because they are confused, but they have no one to talk to about it. Parents don't want to hear it. Church don't want to hear it. Nobody wants to hear it. Now, babysitters and caregivers have strange men and other family members who may have mental problems helping out after you're gone. While we as parents aren't aware, in the case with some very close to me, the child was, like I said before, the situation with many people that I was close to, and the girl that was molesting us, my brother and I, her brother participated in raping my mother. I'm going to say that again. The sickness, she was molesting us. And one night my mother went to the store, and on her way home, him and another guy snatched her up, took her into the woods, raped her. At the time, I didn't understand what rape was. Broke her leg because she tried to fight back. She never mentioned it again. The person who raped her, his mother was her friend. His mother came to my mother and asked her not to turn him in. She didn't want him to go to jail. My mother didn't even tell my father because she was afraid he would kill the guy. And I remember the guy coming to me, and I was a little boy, saying, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to rape your mother. He made me rape your mother. And I didn't even know what rape was. So the babysitter or the kids who are with the babysitter, again, may be molesting our children. And many of you out there have been molested. Many of you don't want to talk about the issue of molestation, the pain of molestation, but it is something that has to be addressed. And I wanted to put that subject on the forefront for today, actually several days, but my live streaming software is acting so funny now. It is the state-of-the-art software, but it just doesn't stream as well as I would like it to. but I'm on Periscope, on Instagram. I'm recording, and I'm also on YouTube. And I'm hoping people will begin to share, especially in Manning, South Carolina. Because in the country, I read statistically that more black boys and girls are dying from opiate overdoses. And statistically, more young black girls are committing suicide in the country. Because in these types of rural areas, we love to keep secrets. You don't even know who your father and mother is because you got pregnant, your mama brought you home, but it was your mama's daddy or your mama's brother or somebody that impregnated her, and your grandparents keep that hidden. So we are a very messed up people. And we grow up defensively, fight or flight mode all the time collectively, but we are trying to compete all the time. And in the midst of all of that competition and partying and entertainment and drinking and smoking and loving and hugging and screwing, our children are being neglected. And the first person that comes along that shows them some form of attention, they give themselves to them. Next thing you know, daughter is in love with her nephew and uncle and cousin because they spend so much time together and you think it's so cute. But behind the door, something else is going on. Now, I know many of us don't like to face issues that we put in our past. But if we don't address them, they will come up again. I promise you that. God has promised that. So we have to begin to address the issue. Talk about the issues. So I thank you for tuning in again, Brother Johnny of the 19 Report. And I wanted to show this picture right here. This is a picture for any of you that had on my YouTube page at the 19 Report of a young man who was a family friend, and the father entrusted this young man to watch his son, was 5 or 6, as he worked, but he got off early one night and saw this boy having anal intercourse with his son. And he beat him to a pulp. You see this picture. He broke his jaw. I mean, he beat him. And while he was beating him, he was calling 911. The boy said that he deserved it. Says father beats teen he caught allegedly molesting his son. This is what's happening behind the door. This is what has happened. This is what is destroying our children. This is what is destroying the family unit. Molestation. Children finding pleasure in same-sex experimentation. Our children are stumbling upon anal sex and the power of it, the power to control the mind with it. And then these older children come along and use them. I have a very close associate of mine who was raped in the locker room at Manning High School. And that started his journey into a homosexual lifestyle because he liked it. If you choose to be homosexual, that's your business. But if you're forced into something because you're forced to try something and you like it, so we have to begin to address these things. I thank you for tuning in. Yeah, that was funny. That was real funny. Real funny.